Hello, I'm Philip Mugglestone, and in this series of videos we're covering the SAP HANA Application Function Modeler. In this video we're going to look at association analysis and have a quick look at the Apriori Lite capability. Now, as always, you must make sure that you're working with the PAL reference guide, and I showed you in a previous video how to get that, and here we can see we've got the documentation for the Lite a priori rule. Now, of course, it talks all about using the wrapper generator and writing lots of SQL script. However, we're going to use the application function modeler to generate all of that code for us. Now, what we first need is to have some data. So if I go to my schema, we'll see that I have a table called Apriori_data. So I've got some data here which basically contains the data I need in order to do some a priori analysis. Now, a priori analysis is about looking at associations, so which products were purchased with other products, which ones were more often, and use that information to make recommendations. People that bought this also bought that, so maybe that, as you're buying this product, maybe you should buy that one as well because it's going to be interesting for you. So at the base level, we only need two pieces of information to work out these associations. We need to know the transaction, or often the order ID, which would be just a numeric ID, and then we would have the actual product IDs of the products that have been sold. So for example, if we were to look at this data, we could see for order ID 0, there were 5 different products sold in it. So there's some kind of affinity within those products. So the a priori algorithm is going to go through the whole set of transactional data, which can be, in this case, about 50,000 rows, but it could be millions and millions of transactions, to try and identify what the best and most interesting associations are, so that we can then use those, as I said, to make recommendations. So here's our data. It's the Apriori_data. We've got two columns, order ID and product ID. The way we work, as we saw in the previous video, is we need to create one of these files in our project. So we're in the studio, we're using the developer perspective, and we go into the project, new, and we're going to create other, and here we go to this AFL connector file. That's the name of the file we want to use, that's the type, and we can give this one a name. Maybe we'll call this Apriori Lite, and it adds in this .afl PMML suffix for us. Now we can see we've got Apriori Lite, and then we can double click on it to start editing with the application function modeler. So the first thing we would do is to look and find the algorithm we want to use, which in this case is going to be Lite Apriori Lite. We'll drag that onto our workspace. Then the second thing we would do is define the schema that we want to create all of our procedures in. You can see here from the previous k-means example, it created things, tables, and it also created procedures that we're using within our AFM user schema. So I'm going to right mouse button just generally here, view properties, and actually I need to be right outside, and view properties. And now we can see the model, so we can call this maybe Apriori Lite, but you can use any name for the model you want. It doesn't have to have the word model in it. And we choose a schema where we want all of this stuff to be generated. So we'll go to our own schema, the AFM user schema. Now we click and expand Apriori Lite. As always, with the application function modeler, we are going to be needing to put one or more input data sets in, and then we're going to have one or more result tables, which in this case is the result as a table and the result in PMML format, this independent model format that you can use to transfer between systems. So we've got our input table, so if we just navigate back towards it, it was a Apriori data. So we can drag and drop that onto our form here. We can see that it's recognized we have order ID and product ID, which are both integer. That fits the structure that we need. That's always in the documentation. So we can then connect it to say that's our input data set. And as it's actually got data in it, you can see it's got this little gold middle column. That shows data actually exists in it. And if we want, we can preview it, which we were already looking at a minute ago. Okay, so that's our input sorted out. Then what we can also see, if we go and check the parameters, we can see that it's also set up some general, in fact, the arguments that we need. And it's chosen the default values or defaults it's decided for the number of threads to use, the minimum support confidence, how to optimize, and is it to be recalculated. Again, you'll find more details on all of these parameters in the manual. Okay, so we can go down, we can see some of those parameters here: minimum support confidence, thread number, optimization time. And we also see the details on what's needed in terms of the transaction ID and the item ID as the two columns and the types they must be for our input data. We also, of course, have our output. So for our output tables, there are two tables, the result and the PMML version of the result, where we have these specific columns. You can give them any name, but they need to be in a specific order, and they need to have a specific column data type. So what we'll now need to do is to go in and populate that. So for our result table, we can go to the results. We've got actually 5 columns that I believe we're going to need to make. So let's add 5. It's quicker this way if you do it, add them all in one go. And then we're going to create the first one, which is we'll call pre-rule, but it can be any name you want. And this is going to be a character variable, so it's varchar, and we can give that maybe 255. We're going to have post rule. We'll do the same, varchar. We'll give it a length of 255. We've got then the support value, which is a double. We've got confidence. Again, you can choose any names you want here. It's the order and the type that's significant. And lift. And we will set those up. Okay. And then there's also the further table, the PMML result table. And that has a fairly standard layout. For that, we're going to have 2 columns. We're going to have something we'll call the ID, which is going to be an integer. It's just a row ID. And then we're going to have our model. Let's call it PMML model. And in here, it's going to be a character variable, but this time it's going to be much longer. It's going to be the maximum, basically 5,000. So this is where we will actually store our results as a model in PMML format. So having said that, you see that we've got green and green ticks, so all the structures are correct. However, I do know a little bit about this data. We've already worked with it before. We know that actually there's not that many, the associations are not that strong in this test data. So I'm just going to change that minimum support value, put it down to 0.002. So basically a fairly small number. So 0.2 for minimum support and confidence, because this is in fact filtering the results. And if we don't find anything, then there'll be an empty result set. So we've set those values in the arguments. We can now save and activate. In fact, in one go, just click activate. We'll save the file, save it on the server in that workspace. It saves it actually in the HANA repository. So now we see it's saved. It's been activated, and we've got that gold cylinder, so we know it's been activated okay. And if you want, we can now run it. And if we run, it says success. We can now go to our result table and preview. We can see we've got those columns we created: pre-rule, post-rule, support confidence, and lift, with the values in. And you can see some of the values. The biggest value of confidence we have, for example, is 0.1. So maybe we want to go to 0.05 to filter, or 0.01 just to get maybe a very small number of results back. So we could actually do that. We could go in and change the parameters and set this one minimum confidence to, I think it was 10%, so 0.1. Okay, we might also want to maybe change the name of an output column. Now we can do that. Maybe we want to call this one support in mixed case, and call this one confidence value, for example, just to show you the point. The names are not significant, it's the types and the order that is significant. We can then, of course, save and activate it again. We need to do that each time. It's now been done and refreshed. And if we now run it again, it runs. We look at our results. We can see have a lot less data. We only have the ones where the value of confidence was more than 10%, so 0.1 in decimal. And also notice the column names have changed. We've got support, confidence value, etc. So we've got quite a lot of scope to define these things as you want them to be. And if we want to look at the PMML, in this case it didn't actually write any output to the PMML. That may be because we didn't have it set with the different options. So we'll look at that one maybe later. The really important thing about the application function modeler is that it's not that you're going to spend your life in here working directly with the modeler. It's that it's now generated as the code. If you go to that SQL window again, it's generated as the SQL script needed. It created that procedure that we're going to work with, which we decided to call the model Apriori Lite. It put a suffix on it of Apriori Lite because that's the name of our file, and it's in the afm.pal package, so that's why you can see this. The name of the table is a little more complex than you might be used to in the AFM user schema. It's created the input-output tables or the output tables. It's created the parameter tables with the right values in. So we didn't set a PMML value, that's why it didn't populate that table. And what we can also do is take that code and run it basically anywhere we want. You can embed it into your own applications, or if you simply want to just run it as a user, you don't need to come in and rebuild it here each time. You can just simply go and run that in any way you want, just by calling this procedure. So if we actually look at our catalog, you'll see that in procedures we've got the two procedures, the k-means and the Apriori Lite we've just made with the model Apriori Lite. That's a procedure. We've got the table types that were associated with it. Okay, there are 4 table types associated with it. We've got the actual result tables. So if we just refresh that one, we see we get the model Apriori, the argument table, and the 2 results tables. And we've not got any views in this case. Now, however, the really great thing about this is that you didn't have to write any of this scripting code, and you didn't have to go to the wrapper generator procedure. You didn't have to create a signature table, all the stuff that you'll see outlined in the manual about how you actually set this up. So that's really the value of the application function modeler, because it's basically generating this kind of code, creating the procedure, etc., etc., the signature table, and calling the wrapper generator. It's doing all of that under the covers for you. In fact, it doesn't even call the wrapper generator. It does it directly because it's native to HANA. So now we've seen how the Apriori Lite works.